Okay, so welcome to our new summer class, Multi-Dimensions of Reality. My name's Barry Rosen. Many of you know me from my writing blogs and maybe my website, or you've been in my classes before. Um, um, Today we're going to have maybe a 25-minute overview of the class and maybe go over some principles so that all of you, have some of the same principles. There are some different schools of thought in astrology, and sometimes there are things that some of you have learned and some of you have not learned. And so how many of you, I sent a videotape of the first class of from my last course which was a lot about the signs of the zodiac, but it also had like a half-hour introduction, which I may not have to repeat if you listen to it. So if you're a new student with me, how many of you, maybe you can just put in chat and nobody else will see it, how many had time to listen to that tape? I sent it, I don't know if I sent it this morning or last night, I can't remember. There were the Jaimini tapes, which I just had wanted you to learn to get a different perspective on Jaimini astrology, which will come into the class later. But I decided I wanted to also have you do some of the other stuff. Can you just maybe let me know how many people were able to kind of listen to that tape, or even the first half hour, because then I can go through that material more quickly. Okay, good, Daniel. I'm glad you got to watch it. One of the things that happens with my classes is that some people take one class and they don't take the next class, and then so people have different levels of understanding, and so I have to kind of find a way to kind of bring you all along. But we'll go over some of it again quickly. Okay, I'm going to start with, you all know how to use GoToMeeting, and you can, sometimes I'll mute you, like you're all muted now, so you can't talk, and then sometimes I'll unmute you so you can speak. And so you can always use the chat. I know a lot of us like texting and chat, so that's fine. We'll go over some of the guidelines for the class. I'm going to start with an invocation now. Anyway, here's my contact information. You have all of this in my the slideshow that I sent you. I'm on Facebook a lot, so if you text me there, I probably will get it. I look at my email every 15 minutes. I rarely return phone calls. If you're in the U.S., you can look for it. And on Facebook, many of you know me. I write blogs on Barry Rosen, Astro Yoga, Spiritual Astrology, and that's good for you guys to know. So I'm really good at communication. So let's start with invoking Ganesha, who's kind of the patron deity of astrology. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapataye Namaha, Om Ganapataye Namaha, Om Ganapataye Namaha. Sahana Bhavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavahai, Tejasvina Vatitamastu Mahavidishabhai, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The prayer from the Upanishads: let us be together, let us eat together, let us be vile together, let us be radiating truth, radiating the light of life. Never shall we denounce anyone, never entertain negativity. It's something that Jyotishis have to kind of learn, is that we have to be neutral and not political. So some of you are alive, some of you will listen to the tape. We have a lady from Turkey in the class, and I know she has some problems with internet connections. I'm not sure she's here. Her name, she's the lady in the bottom left. Her name is Pinar from Turkey. We have Nicole, and I need to get a picture of you, Nicole, so maybe you can email me one so we can have it, share it with the rest of the class. Vina, I don't know if Vina's with us from Kauai. Vina's a jeweler, and she always goes to trade shows a lot on Sundays, but she's a very gifted jeweler, and she's joining us from Hawaii. She's been in some of my other classes. Christina from the Philippines is rarely with us live because it's like 12 hours difference. And so it's like 3 o'clock in the morning there, so we may never see her, but Christina will welcome her. Partho is visiting today. He's back from his travels and he's in San Jose today. Sonaral, I'm not sure she's here yet. I haven't seen her. Maybe she will come later. Sometimes she's in Mumbai, which is also quite late. It's like 1:30 in the morning there. So, but she's been coming to the classes and she's been enjoying them. Daniel, I need to get a picture of you also, so maybe there's one you'd like to send me. I think you're in London, Daniel, if that's correct. And Catherine's here today from Alberta. And Helen is, I think, going to watch the tape from the videos. I don't think we'll ever see her. She's been real busy. My friend John is always spending time with his family. We probably won't see him also. So our class schedule is we're going to have 8 classes. There's no class Labor Day. People always need a day off when they're traveling and stuff like that. So our last class is September 10th. So there's one week off, and that'll be between classes 7 and 8. I'll remind you about that. Yes, I invited some people who haven't signed up to be in the class. If you like the class today and you want to be in it, certainly contact me and we can get you registered. I think you have a copy of the syllabus. Today, we're going to probably just talk about the moon chart, the Chandra Lagna, and I had hoped to get to the sun chart, which is called the Surya Lagna chart. There's a chapter in Parashara on the sun chart, and to me it's kind of amazing that maybe Western astrology wasn't totally wrong in looking at the sun chart, and no one ever teaches the moon or the sun chart properly, so that's something we're going to do, and they are kind of levels of existence. So we're not going to actually do very much on the Rashi chart or the natal chart because most of you know that, and that's the one thing you do know. So I'll just mention a few ways that we use it today. We're probably going to focus mainly on the moon chart today. So next week we'll probably do the sun chart, and we'll start the lesson on nakshatras, which is the way the dispositors of the nakshatras and their connections create kind of a mental matrix in the mind, and I'll send you some reading material on that. Nakshatras are totally fascinating. I write about them all the time, and they affect our mind, so we really need to understand them. And that will probably blend into the lesson on the Navamsha, which was going to be 2 lessons, and now it's probably going to be about 1.5. And then we'll look at what happens when you rotate the Navamsha chart and look at the soul and the soul's purpose, and we'll spend a lesson on that, and then moving to the Arudha Lagna, which is the way people see us, and then looking at how your chart rotates around the cycles that you're in, and then we'll have a lesson on astrolocality. Again, my classes are kind of unique and stuff. Next fall, I'm teaching a class in financial astrology. It's on my website if you want to find out more about it. Conferences, those of you who are in the U.S., the Sedona Vedic Astrology Conference is November 30th to December 2nd, put on by the American College of Vedic Astrology. I will be there. Welcome, Pinar. Thank you for coming. And I'll also be speaking at the United Astrology Conference in Chicago in 2018. Just good. Conferences are a great way to meet people and hear all kinds of great knowledge, so something to think about if you like to travel. Our class purpose, I like to look at astrology in a slightly different way. A lot of people want to use astrology to kind of predict what will happen, which takes away the fear of the future, and that's very valid. I like to look at astrology as a way of seeing the emotional and psychological patterns that impact our life, and that allows us to see the puppet strings that are kind of binding us to Maya. You know, we're in a Saturn period. Saturn's going over ascendant. We're gripped by fear. We understand it's Saturn. We know what to do to get through Saturn with yoga and meditation. It doesn't grip us anymore, and we're more powerful. So I think my purpose in Jyotish is helping you to understand the emotional and psychological patterns. And by focusing on the planets, we develop what's called Jyotirvid. The planet's going to start talking to you. And so by looking at them daily, they become your friends and they start talking to you. And I've shared how, you know, I'm in the shower sometimes and some transit will flash, which is an answer to some problem I'm thinking about. And so the more you spend time with the planets, the more you develop that. And that's the ultimate purpose of studying Jyotish. It's very difficult to learn on the level of the intellect. Eventually, it develops into the level of consciousness. And we can't be a Jyotish encyclopedia. I mean, I often, you know, I have a library of 150 to 200 books, and when a problem comes up, you know, I can't keep it all in my head. I go to the book that I need. So you shouldn't be shy about thinking that you have to know everything. It's nearly impossible in Jyotish. But we want to learn techniques to be better at seeing these patterns in ourselves and in others. And then we sometimes have to go to the books to kind of look up things, and that's fine. And Jyotish ultimately helps us explain why we're here, why we're suffering, what do we have to change in our life and our patterns to improve them. So in this particular class, we're trying to foster new techniques and new ways of looking at charts. And my whole point is that people kind of only learn the Rashi chart, the natal chart, and they only look at their ascendant. And that's not totally true of everybody, but many people get very stuck in thinking that they're that one chart, that rising sign that they were born with, and that's their whole chart. And Jyotish is more like a holographic matrix of multiple levels that interact and rotate, and it's more like DNA. You know, there's a heliacal structure, and it's not a line written in stone. It's not a piece of paper on a chart. It's really much multidimensional, and so we need to kind of, so the purpose of this course is to learn to understand the different dimensions, and then eventually when you understand all the dimensions, they start kind of synthesizing into an interpretation. So we have to learn all the parts over the next 7 or 8 weeks, and then we have to synthesize the parts into seeing something bigger. I don't know what kind of software you all use. I know Sri Jyoti software is what I use, produced by Andrew Foss. It will automatically calculate a lot of the things that we're doing in this class. If you have other softwares like Parashara's Light, or if you have freeware like some of the softwares do certain things, some of them don't. Some of them don't do it well. But you know, we're all on budgets. You know, if you have it in your budget to buy Sri Jyoti Star 7, you know, I highly recommend it, because it Andrew put 9 years into the latest edition, and it's quite amazing what it does, and I'm always amazed. It makes my life really simple. I can do a lot of these things because the software does them already. I don't have to do them by hand. The format for this talk is going to be lectures and pauses for questions, and we will try to work with your charts. Again, you didn't send me your chart data and you want your chart used as an example, please do that. I'm not sure we'll get to too many charts today. I do use Northern India style. I know some of you would like me to use Southern India style. I have to, there's a switch on my program that will allow me to put both of them up simultaneously, and I have to find that switch. I am encouraging those of you who don't know Northern India to learn it, because you buy a book or you read an article, and the person, it might be in Northern, and you don't want to be, you go to a conference, most of the conference people use Northern and Southern, and most of the teachers will use Northern and Southern, and I will do that for you as soon as I get that switch figured out. I've had a number of emergencies today with dog that came out of the vet hospital, and the power went out of my house for 10 hours. So I got my class done. We're live, but I didn't figure out how to get that dual switch up, so I will get it done by next week. And so with books, again, I think it's good to have some. My favorite book, if you had to just have one book in your JoJo's library, is Bill Levis's book, Beneath the Vedic Sky. I think it's got very, I like it because the way he outlines every planet has a good side and a bad side, and even the nakshatras, based on their ownerships, have good and bad sides. Misty Larson's book is actually very good because he's a Jaimini scholar, Sanjay Rath, and that was another book that I had recommended. And he has a chapter on Arudha Lagna, which would be useful. So I want to review some of the keys. I did this in the videotape that I sent. I'm going to just go over them quickly. This actually is not quite right. Maharishi Parashara was Jaimini's, Maharishi Parashara, the founder of Jyotish from, I don't know, 10,000 years ago or whatever, had a son named Jaimini, and he's called Maharishi Jaimini, and he obviously was with his father when his father gave all these lectures, and these lectures are kind of summarized in these sutras in, in Parashara's texts. Jaimini also has a lot of material that his father touched on that he wrote books on. And Sanjay Roth has recently brought out that material. And I found it's kind of like, we have these ancient lectures, but we weren't there, we don't have the YouTube video for them. So sometimes Parashara will mention something, but it's only Jaimini that talks about. So there are a lot of things that Parashara talks about that are very important, but there's not a lot of material in his writings, and his son actually gave more information on it. So the two of them are not opposed to each other. They're very connected. Most of the astrology today taught is Parashara astrology, and I've been fascinated by Jaimini astrology, and I think it adds a very rich dimension. And I sent you the two videotape introductions to Jaimini, which you can still find time to listen to. But we will be incorporating a lot of Jaimini, and there's some things that we need to know about Jaimini too. But most of you know that Rahu aspects the 1st, 5th, and 9th. In Jaimini astrology, it also aspects the 2nd house from itself. That's something that people don't always know. It's called the 12th house aspect backwards, so it's the 2nd house. Rahu is the co-ruler of Aquarius with Saturn, and sometimes it's primary, and Ketu is the co-ruler of Scorpio. Again, this is something that's not taught, but it's really important. I'll send you a list of rules. For the most part, the planet that has more planets connected to it by conjunction or aspect becomes the primary ruler. So like I'm Scorpio rising, and for years until I learned Jaimini astrology, I thought I was ruled by Mars, with my Mars in the 6th in Aries, but my primary ruler is Ketu, and Ketu's in the 8th house with Jupiter in Gemini, and my personality and my life is really, astrology and teaching and Gemini and education, and the Ketu, and I've really been meditating for 40 years, and the Ketu in the 8th house describes my personality, and that's something that is really something that comes up. So whenever we look at Aquarius and Scorpio, we always have to remember there are two rulers. You have to look at both rulers, but knowing the primary one is helpful. I do like the outer planets. We're not going to do much with them in this class, a little bit. I did talk about them in my last course. Uranus is connected to Aquarius. It's a higher octave of Mercury. Pluto is connected to Scorpio. It's a higher octave of Mars. Neptune is connected to Pisces. It's a higher octave of Venus. They are very important to understand, and they do add insights. These are some other points from Jaimini astrology. There's a thing called Mula Trikona, which means it's like the second base place for a planet to be. And Sanjay Rath talks about the analogy of, a planet is home in one place, it's the office in another place. The office is almost as good as home. And so the moon, what's not often taught is that the moon is Mula Trikona in Taurus, that's where it's exalted. And so that's obviously, we all know that's a good place for it to be. Mercury and Rahu are very much at home in the sign of Virgo, where it's kind of like their office. Ketu is again very much at home in Scorpio. Aquarius, Rahu is often considered primary for Aquarius. I'm realizing more and more that when you understand Aquarius and the problems with Aquarius rising, which you can hear on my videotape that I sent, it's because Rahu really is more primary than Saturn. And the more you understand Aquarius, the more you understand that. In Pisces, Jupiter is, again, the primary home. Ketu is the office, so Ketu is very much at home in Pisces, the 12th sign of Zodiac. I think I'll pass on this. We're going to talk about this in the Nakshatra lesson. But Vedic astrology is very microscopic, and one of the things I'd like to teach is, every degree has meaning. Every half degree of the zodiac is connected to a deity that has karmic information. Each pada of the nakshatras has information. And in lesson 2 and 3, we'll learn about how to decode that information. It's something for you to kind of start looking at a little bit. It's quite fascinating to start realizing that every piece of information is like reading a piece of DNA and gives information. And then finally, it's important for us to know this idea of the Arudha Lagna, and I have to send you a sheet on how to calculate it. But the Arudha Lagna is almost as important as the Lagna, and the Arudha Lagna is the way people see us. So, for example, I'm Scorpio rising with Scorpio moon. I mean, you could pull up my chart if you want to see it. Again, it's northern style, but I may use my chart not because I'm obsessed with it, because I know it so well and I can quickly pull examples from it. So bear with me if I do that too much. So I'm Scorpio rising with, at the top diamond is the rising sign in the first house, and 8 stands for Scorpio, the 8th sign of the zodiac. My Arudha Lagna, which is not calculated properly in this program, it isn't in the other version, is actually Capricorn. And it's based on the fact that K2 is my chart lower, and we count 8 from K2, and that gives us Capricorn. And so people see me as a Capricorn, very kind of business person. Venus in the first house, a friendly business person. And when people meet me, they think, I just had lunch with a friend today, and he said, "Are you Capricorn?" I said, "Yes," because that's my Arudha Lagna, and that's how people see me. And so the way people see us can impact our lives. If we're, and I was doing a chart of a lady, and she's got K2 in her Arudha Lagna, and K2 makes people invisible, right? And so she gets passed over for job promotions because even though she's very talented, people see K2, which is invisible. It's headless, right? So, the Arudha Lagna is very important for prediction for a lot of things. We'll spend a whole lesson on it, but I just want you to start thinking about it. I may send you an early article about it. Just it's very important, and it's one of these things that's not taught outside of Jaimini astrology. And my contact information again. So I'm going to quickly take, good, I got through that in 25 minutes. I'm going to quickly unmute you and see if you have any questions on anything that I've said. And I want to welcome Vina, who's here from Hawaii now, and Keith from Washington, D.C., and Partho joined us from San Jose now. So, any general questions on anything that I've covered? No, we're going to start the official class in a minute with the second slideshow that I sent you on the moon. Okay. and I'm sorry, I used to teach college. I'm a college professor, and unfortunately on the first day of class, you have to get, sometimes you can just jump into material. Partho, I think you need to have a question?
Barry, so I had a quick question. So how do you actually, maybe not very pertinent to the class, I'm not sure. So if you look at, say, a particular graha and it's, say, Mula Trikona, or say it's exalted or debilitated, suppose let's just take, say, Mula Trikona or exalted, but it does not have, maybe it is in its Maran Karakstan, or if it's debilitated but it's in its Digbala, like the place where it's, so how do you, I guess, like reconcile sign placement and house placement if they each other?
That's good. House placement's always more important than sign placement. That's I probably should, again, to teach a class kind of on hierarchical things to look at. I do have some slides on it in one of my classes. Maybe I can send it to you. But, Jyotish is always 1,000 shades of gray, and you have to eventually, you get these situations. Well, you get an exalted, I had a chart yesterday, you had an exalted moon that's exactly conjunct Rahu. The Rahu's exalted, and the moon's exalted, and it's in the 9th house, which is where Rahu hates to be because it's, so, that's a perfect example of, one of these, you get kind of these 1,000 shades of gray. And you can start by, talking, if you're not sure about it, if you're a new Jyotishi, you start asking questions, what was your relationship like with your mother? And the person said, well, she committed suicide, okay? Moon exactly conjunct Rahu, so you have to kind of, trying to get a kind of hierarchical, I'm very analytical like you are, Partho, because I have a lot of Gemini, and I like to kind of get mathematical formulas. And Jyotish isn't always like that. I'm one of the few people that tries to put together mathematical formulas sometimes. At the end of our moon chart lesson, which I have some new slides on a cookbook for doing moon charts. But sometimes you end up having to kind of synthesize, and it becomes kind of a question of feeling your way through, in the beginning, asking a lot of questions. Clearly, when you have a moon exactly conjunct Rahu, you're going to, it's a problem situation because they're bitter enemies. And at the same time, the person is incredibly psychic, and that's something you would see from moon conjunct Rahu because that's one of the things that it creates, and it's in the 9th house. Jyotish is always a mixed bag. They're incredibly psychic, and they're kind of an emotionally difficult person and can cry at the drop of a hat, but they're incredibly psychic. So there's always a good or bad side even to these kind of complex situations. Good question.
Thanks.
I don't know did I answer it?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good summary. I think like your opening with just the house placement is more important than, I mean, the sign. So for example, your Saturn in your chart, in your 12th house, for example, that really like being in the 12th house, it doesn't get much of a good placement in terms of the house it is in, like, in terms of Digbala, it's probably fairly low. But I think it is a benefit for you, and the sign, it is okay. How do you look at your Saturn in your 12th house?
Yeah, my Saturn's pretty good. So I have this very complicated Saturn. It's exalted retrograde in the 12th house, okay? And it's Saturn, which is kind of a malefic for Scorpios, right? So the way it manifests is just like an incredible number of expenditures for me. The exalted Saturn gives a lot of outward success in technical things and being very organized and so in Libra it gives me a lot of business relationship skills. It's very organized with, exalted planets are 3 times as powerful to get things done. And I even got a scholarship to study computer science in 1972, which was kind of kind of something connected to my exalted Saturn. The 12th house makes it very meditative, right? 12th house is about meditation, and it also is good for connections with foreign countries. The problem with the retrograde Saturn is that it creates inner fear. So when an exalted planet is retrograde, it doesn't cancel the outward exaltation. It creates an inner subjective problem. So I have a lot of inner fear, and I have a lot of inner worry, and that's from the retrograde Saturn, even though I excel in the exalted Saturn things. And the 12th house placement really just creates an incredible amount of expenditures in my life all the time. I can't ever get them under control. And that's kind of a block to moksha for me. Anyway, good question. I don't want to talk about myself too much, but we'll talk about your chart next time, Parker.
Okay.
Okay, I'm putting you on mute, and we're going to go to slideshow 2. Okay, so if you're following along, you should be in slideshow 2, which I sent you, which is called 1B. And so this brings us to the main lesson today, which is on the differences between rising signs, moon sign, Chandra Lagna, which is called the moon chart, the natal chart, the Rashi chart, and the surya Lagna, which is called the sun chart. I have spent my life trying to translate Sanskrit into English terms for everybody, and what happens is you pick up an article or a book, and they're always talking about the Sanskrit terms. So I'm going to bring in the Sanskrit always for you to learn, because in the same way you have to know northern style charts, is because you pick up a book, you end up having to use it. Okay, so there's 3 Lagnas that we're going to talk about today, and we'll start by an overview of what the differences are. So the Sun Lagna, which is called Surya Lagna, is about your destiny, your resources, your finances, and your good fortune. And so from a financial, one of my things, people, I'm a financial astrologer, and that's been my call to fame for about 20 years. I'm trying to move and become a spiritual astrologer now, because I'm writing, much more about spirituality. But the sun chart is very important for people when you're talking about their career and their finances and their resources. It shows the past fortune. And so we're going to probably have a whole hour lesson on that next week. We're going to just touch on it today. The Moon Lagna, which we're going to spend most of our time on today, called the Chandra Lagna, is a chart of the mind, the emotions, and the psychology. And the Rashi chart, which everybody knows, which we're not going to spend much time on, is the kind of the core basis for everything. So for a long time, I was very fascinated by all these multiple charts, and all my colleagues say, well, the Rashi chart is the most important. Well, the Rashi chart is the most important because it creates the chart of everything else. So it's the chart that you're born with. It contains your deepest karmic patterns that create a blueprint in all the Varga charts and the whole chart. The problem is that I don't think the Rashi chart is something that's written in stone. My experience in doing charts is that, first of all, the things that you come up with, when I do charts of people over 35 to 40 years of old, they say, yeah, you're right, I went through that, but now my life is different. When you get married, you become your Navamsha chart, your D9 chart. And the Navamsha chart often becomes a chart of later in life. And so if you get stuck on reading somebody's Rashi chart as being the be-all and end-all, you're missing the boat. And if you read my article on astrolocality, when you move, the Rashi chart moves, and it clearly manifests very concrete things that can only be explained by moving the lagna of the chart. So it can't be a line on stone, and yet everybody treats it as a line on stone. So we have to look at the Rashi chart as maybe containing, we have to have a foundation for making a chart, and it contains our core-most DNA patterns, our deepest patterns, but it's not a line on stone. Planets conjoining the sun will show your view of the world. So during the dashas of those planets, you'll have a strong say on your path in life at that time. So we'll look at that more next week. But the sun chart kind of reveals a lot of our view of this world. Planets connected to the moon will show us your view of society, people, home, and marriage. Now, one of the things that I want to emphasize with the moon chart, and people, especially women, come to you about family life and marriage and stuff like that, the moon chart becomes almost the primary chart to focus on, because the moon chart is about the moon, which is happiness. It's about our mental attitude. It's about home and marriage, right? So that's one reason to turn to the moon chart. When somebody immediately starts asking you about home and married life, it becomes a really important chart. And the moon is the mind, and the planets conjoining the mind show our preference in mental happiness. And so the planets conjoining the moon kind of influence our experience of our families and our social life and our marriage during those periods. Planets joining the rising sign show our views and judgment. So now the interesting thing about the rising sign, which no one really talks about too much, is that the rising sign is very connected most to maybe our free will, our ability to kind of, the moon may give us some desire for something, but our rising sign, if it's strong, the planet owning the rising sign will give us the ability to make good choices about our desires. Do we go for that ice cream or do we avoid the ice cream? So the moon may desire the ice cream, but the rising sign, if it's strong, will say, no, I know that ice cream's not good for me, I'm going to pass. Weak rising sign, give into your desires, get into trouble, get fat or get sick from the ice cream, that kind of thing. So the rising sign has a lot to do with our intelligence, our ability to judge, our ability to impact our judgment. And we have to remember to use it in that way sometimes, because it's very important. And just as a sidebar, I mentioned this in my intro tape too. This idea, I like to use the word planetary associations. So planetary associations can mean a planet connected to the moon, in the rising sun, in the conjunct the moon, aspecting the moon. It could be formed by a yoga between the moon and another planet. Let's say Cancer and Scorpio are exchanging signs, with Mars and Cancer and the moon in Scorpio. It's an exchange. It's called the Parivartana Yoga. Parivartana yogas are very strong for creating association. Maybe there's no aspect between Scorpio and Cancer, but that yoga is an association. So we always have to remember associations are not just conjunctions or oppositions or aspects, but they're also yogas. And even, as we'll learn next week when we talk about nakshatras, a planet in a nakshatra creates an association. So we have to remember that when we're discerning connections in each chart, that there are multiple, I like to use the word planetary associations. And there's many ways they can happen. And we also learned, if you listen to the Jaimini tape, you have what's called Rashi Drishti, which are planets, signs aspect each other. So like Gemini, a planet in Gemini will always aspect a planet in Virgo and Sagittarius and Pisces, just because all the dual signs aspect each other. That one's easy to remember. But that also is another kind of association, and we'll learn more about that. But I just wanted to, this is a sidebar here. So there's three perspectives. Planets joining the sun will show your view of the world. I'm just reviewing what we said. Planets joining the moon will show your view of society, your home and your marriage. The moon will also be very connected to our likes and dislikes and our preferences, as well as our happiness. So keywords to always use with the moon are what makes you happy, what are your likes, what are your dislikes. So that's a key thing to look at the moon for. And planets joining the views show your ability to judge your experience, your intelligence in dealing with that which comes your way. So again, the moon chart, what I like to do, so that what we're drawn to. It has a lot to do with our desire nature, then. It's a little bit like Rahu in that respect. what I like to do. The rising shows our intelligence and judgment about making good choices. And the sun chart may ultimately decide the course of our destiny and what our fortune brings to us. So here's an example. So you have an alcoholic, and there's a preference here. So the moon may be drawn to alcohol, and that's often, you'll find, sometimes moon Rahu, moon Mars or something, and people are kind of drawn to alcohol. But if their Lagna is strong, let's say they have their Lagna Lord is Mars and it's exalted in Capricorn in the third house or something, they're going to have the strength and the willpower to stay off of their desires. If their Lagna is weak, like Venus in the 12th house in Virgo, an extreme example, Libra rising, they have a very weak willpower and they're going to indulge in their sensual addictions, right? So that's how we have to look at the Lagna. It's the brain which shows the intelligence to make the right decisions. So the moon shows your nature and your mentality and your personality. The sun shows your path in life, your destiny, and your financial resources. And your rising sign shows how your decisions influence your nature. So the rising sign is kind of like the mediating factor that helps with your choices. And that's why it's really important to have a strong rising sign, because it means the person is good at decisions. You see somebody with a weak rising sign, they're often coming to you for a reading because they just can't decide what to do. Their decision and their intelligence to make decisions to improve their life is just not there. Same, another example like the alcohol, the chocolate, same thing. Okay, the moon, in Vedic astrology, I had a question on Jyotish currents from my colleagues. The Indians think the moon is the most important planet, and I think in the West sometimes we look more at the ascendant. And I've been totally kind of fascinated why the Indians are so enamored by the moon. If you go to India, they ask you what your moon nakshatra is. When I was in India, they said, they didn't ask me what my rising sign was. They said, what's your nakshatra, meaning my moon's nakshatra, and I would say Jastya, or they would say what's and so the moon is really important in Vedic astrology, and we have to understand why, which is why we have this whole lesson on why is the moon chart forgotten. The Indians think it's more important than anything. And I have like maybe 150 or 200 Jyotish books, and I have one book that has information on moon charts, and only Sanjay Rath and his students have really brought out the hidden understanding of how to do the moon chart. Most people think the moon chart should just be another way of doing a Rashi chart. You just use the moon as the ascendant. Well, you can do that, but it's not actually even correct. So there is a correct way to do the moon chart, and there'll be another correct way to do the sun chart next week when we learn that. And I find this kind of fascinating because no one's teaching anymore, and that's why I brought it into my class. So the moon on an esoteric level is connected to the Divine Mother, the protector, deep thinking, emotional upsurge, intellectual growth. It sends the soul on its mission for self-discovery. What happens is, our emotions get affected. We get fearful, we get angry, we get jealous, and then we start kind of looking at ourselves and saying, well, why am I here on the planet? Why am I having this emotional upheaval? And it forces us to look to discover ourselves. Why are we here? So it creates kind of a deep searching aspect. So the moon has that kind of quality. Now it turns out, this is very kind of a key point, that the moon sign is important. We're going to talk about that, but the moon's nakshatra is the most important thing. It's said in Vedic astrology, the moon travels through one lunar mansion through the 27 or 28 nakshatras every day, and that takes about, it's 12 degrees. And so the moon's nakshatra is considered the most important thing in Vedic astrology. Now, why is this, and what will it tell us? We're going to talk a little bit about this. Again, the moon sign, the moon chart is very connected to family life, marriage, happiness, and our mental state. And it shows us happiness is, from it. So, I think our challenge, my personal challenge with the moon chart is I have my moon and my ascendant, so my moon chart and my Rashi chart are identical. And but I think when we do moon charts, again, if people are asking about family life, about marriage, about their mental condition, we might really need to start with the moon chart, and we'll see why in a minute. Personally, and again, this is my opinion, if the moon is stronger than the rising sign or the sun, you might want to do the moon chart rather than the rising sign or the sun chart. I also, certainly if you're in a moon period, you will find people in moon periods all the time, the moon becomes the center of the chart. That's another place to start with the moon chart if the person's in a moon period. If the person's Cancer rising, then obviously they're ruled by the moon, and that's another reason to start with the moon chart. And, you know, I think the moon chart, and I'm not being sexist here, is probably more important for women because women are very connected to that feminine maternal energy. So I think that's another reason to kind of think about the moon chart. But the moon chart is important for everybody, but I just want to give you some places, you know, sometimes the moon chart just gets forgotten and people kind of, and even the Jyotish texts say that you should always do your transits from the moon chart, which I do, but you know, for me, I've been kind of spoiled because my moon and my ascendant are in the same place. But the transits from the moon chart shows our happiness and what's being affected by our happiness, obviously, and how the transits are impacting our happiness. So I'm going to take some quick questions here, and one of my challenges. Okay, go ahead. So one of my challenges, by the way, and I apologize for this, is that I sometimes can be like a fire hose, the way I kind of throw out knowledge and I talk very quickly. And I apologize for that. I'm toning it down, which is why I took this lesson in half, and I just am doing moon charts today. But you know, you can always review the tape if I go too fast. You know, Jyotish is like this endless ocean, and you know, what I'm trying to do for you is I'm sending you the PowerPoints ahead of time so you can read through them. So that's first exposure. Second time you listen to me live and you can ask questions, and then you go home and you review the tape and you have a third exposure. By the third exposure, or you reread the PowerPoints again, you should be able to kind of pick up the material. So I'm sorry sometimes if I'm a fire hose, but that's I'm working on it. And I think sometimes I blow people away because I give them too much, but I'm working on toning it down this class. Any questions?
How do you see if the moon chart is actually stronger than the ascendant? I've been told my ascendant's stronger than my moon. So, but the moon, being a woman, a moon would be important. So. Right.
Well, there are other reasons to do the moon chart other than the reasons I just gave you. You know, obviously you just have to learn all the rules of Jyotish. So obviously, if the ascendant lord has dignity, in other words, it's exalted, it's in its own sign, it's in a friend's sign. If the ascendant lord is aspected by benefics or connected to benefic nakshatras, if the ascendant lord is in good houses for itself. So, you know, obviously trines and kendras 1, 4, 7, and 10 are good places for the ascendant lord. The ascendant lord actually does well in any. The ascendant lord is like God, right? So it does well in any house. Even the ascendant lord in the 8th house makes the person interested in esoteric knowledge and in moksha, and it isn't a bad placement because the ascendant lord, even in the 12th house, is actually makes the person maybe more meditative. But it's the lord of the chart. It does well wherever it's placed. But you know, I think it becomes. You look at dignity. Is it in a good sign? Is it exalted? Is it weak? Does it have a lot of bad aspects? And sometimes it's a close call. You know, maybe when we practice in a minute, we'll pull up your charts and we'll see what's strongest, your rising sign, your sun sign, or your moon sign. But you know, the point is that they're all important. You have to know how they work in your chart. If your rising sign is weak, it means that your decision-making ability is affected. If your sun sign is weak, like it's in the 12th in Libra or something, it may mean that you're denied good fortune in this life from past karma. If your moon sign is weak, your mind could be all over the place. It could be an emotional puddle. It could be color your mood, and you might not be happy. I mean, I have a Scorpio moon aspected by Mars, hemmed in by Rahu and Saturn, and when I was younger and when I was in the moon period, it was a mess. I've done a lot of meditation. I've done a lot of yoga. My moon is still kind of a mess, but it's at least, I understand it well. But I would say, it can get pessimistic. It can get dark at times. It can get depressed. It can get fearful. It dominates, and I have to remember what's going on with it, too, and do things to make it better, like meditation. Okay, other questions? Okay.
Very just a quick one. So with the moon, there's also the phases of the moon, right? So
Right.
you talk about the inherent strength of the moon, and so I think, like, in some places you talk about the dark moon as being not benefic but a malefic, but really I think, like, what I've seen and what I hear, like even Sanjay kind of talks of it that way as well, is like basically the phase of the moon really determines how much light there is in the moon and how much can support what you can do. So a moon which is almost dark means the promise of the support of the moon may not be there that much. It'll exhaust itself very easily. So how do you take that into consideration for a moon chart to say, like, if say moon is if it's an almost dark moon, but say it's in Cancer or something like that?
Yeah, again, it's this 1,000 shades of gray question. I think the waxing moon is very important. I mean, James Braha says one of the best things about a chart that you can have, of all he gives a list of 16 or 17 things that are important. He almost puts a full moon at the top of a chart of his list. So if you're born around a full moon, it creates a very spiritual soul. And when I do charts of people that have full moons, they're very bright spiritual beings. There's a lot of light there, obviously. When you do a chart of somebody that has a new moon, they're pretty emotionally, imploded, and they may not even have had a spiritual awakening yet. And again, there's always 1,000 shades of coloration. It's, is it in Cancer? Is it in Scorpio? Is it in an enemy sign? We have to. Part of our lesson is to really start kind of honing in on what the person's mind is like. What do they have to deal with? How can we help them? So and I could have, and maybe next week I'll add, there's this whole book on Panchanga. I mean, you can look at Tithis and Karanas and Nakshatras and Nitya Yogas, and all these things are connected to the moon, and they give even more information about the moon. That's why it's so important. My dog wants to go out. We know what happens if you don't let the dog out. Okay, and my computer is out of power, so I've got to find the plug. It didn't get plugged in. How did that happen? I had a power failure and everything kind of got messed up. So let's hope that works. If I run out of power, I'll have to just move the computer to another plug. But, I have a weird Uranus connection today. Okay, so I'm going to mute you guys again and continue. Okay, so there's 4 lunar personalities that we want to look at. And, I think it's one of these things that when you're looking at somebody's chart, you want to really kind of look at this. So if the moon is with malefics, it creates a tamasic mind. Now, tamasic sometimes has bad connotations. Tamasic sometimes just means material. The person may, you have moon, I have like Mars connected to my moon, which is a yoga for wealth. It would only come out in a moon-Mars or a Mars-moon period. But it can create kind of material quality to the moon. And so that's kind of what tamasic means. It also can create some mental suffering and maybe a bad nature. The moon with the sun is, is considered kind of cruel, but having a very spiritual attitude. So people with full moons in their chart, where the moon and the sun are opposed to each other, are very powerful and very spiritual people. And to me, it's one of the most powerful things in a chart. And I'm seeing this more and more as I do charts. I think it's a very powerful thing because I think these people are very, the sun and the moon are the most important planets in the chart. And I think we're starting our class by looking at moon charts and sun charts because the sun and the moon are the two most important planets in the chart. And if those planets are strong, then the life is, taken care of, If both those planets are having problems, like especially sun in the 12th or moon in the 8th, you get, the life is very kind of, has much more difficulties. So creative people, moon with Venus or Mercury, very creative minds, desires to learn, desires to read, to create, very good with material enjoyments. And the moon with Jupiter is the sattvic mind, strong, joyous, positive, hopeful. That's, whenever you see moon-Jupiter connections in a chart, that's the best one. I don't like to say best and worst, but, there is, moon-Jupiter people, they're just optimistic, they're joyous, they're hopeful. When they have hope, they can get through anything, So that's, you have to kind of remind people, if they're having problems, that, well, you've got the strong moon-Jupiter connection in the chart. And that could be, again, it's moon, we use the word association, so it could be moon in Jupiter's Nakshatra, it could be moon conjunct the June, Jupiter trining the moon, it could be the moon in Sagittarius, it could be Cancer and Sagittarius exchanging signs, probably better Cancer and Pisces exchanging signs, that's a 1-9 exchange. It could be, moon in Pisces and Jupiter in Gemini, and there's a Jaimini aspect there. So all those associations, can create these connections. So I want you to think bigger with your associations. So the moon sign itself, so we're talking about the moon signs and the moon nakshatras. The moon sign reveals your personality and mental configuration. It shows the level of prana, health, and disease. It reveals your thoughts and thinking, and your awareness and your consciousness. So the thing that you have to remember to ask about, this goes back to our basic Jyotish, is what are the qualities of the signs involved? And so one of the things you want to remember is the moon connected to a fixed sign, a movable sign, or a dual sign? And we'll review those quickly. And what are the gunas? Rajas, tamas, and sattva. We'll review those quickly. So the movable signs, which are also in Western astrology called cardinal signs, and the Vedic term is chara, are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. And the way I remember these is 1, 4, 7, 10. So if you have an Aries rising chart, the Kendras are Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. They're the movable signs. And the movable signs, the good quality is they like to move or take actions. They're innovative. They're full of change. They like to travel. They're positive and action-oriented. They're outgoing. They're ambitious, and they're confident. Those are good qualities. If the planet's afflicted, they may be scattered, hasty, impatient, impractical, forceful, arrogant, overambitious, too active, running around like a rabbit. So again, you always have to judge the quality of is the sign afflicted by malefics or benefics? Is it, are there other bad associations? Fixed signs, which are called stira, and that comes up, are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, 2, 5, 8, and 11. And I always have trouble thinking of Aquarius as a fixed sign. Taurus is the most earthy sign. It's always the easiest one to remember as a fixed sign. Leo, the sun is like fixed in the zodiac. It just doesn't move, so you can always remember Leo as a fixed sign. Scorpio, I always have trouble thinking of that as a fixed sign. I am a Scorpio, and I am kind of a fixed person, so I guess I can remember that. Aquarius, to me, is like an air sign, so I don't understand why it can be fixed, but it is a fixed sign. Favorable qualities, stable, conservative, practical, and those are qualities that I know well. Unfavorable, disinclined to change. I've been in the same job for 30 years. I don't like changing. I lived in the same house, for 10 years in Sedona. Don't like changing. Obsessive, inflexible, possessive, fixed in ideas, reflective, positive, and determined. Dual signs, immutable signs called Dvutsvava. Those are the four corners of the zodiac: Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, 3, 6, 9, and 12. Those are adaptable, balanced, subtle, quick-witted, but they can be considered fickle, ups and downs, divided, inconsistent, full of contradictions, erratic, that kind of thing. Now, one of my first Jyotish teachers was Pandit Oja, who wrote a very old book called Sacred Books of the Hindus, Predictive Astrology of the Hindus. And in that book, and I always like these old Jyotish masters, he says that the first half of the dual signs are fixed and the second half is movable. And to me that makes a lot of sense because, when people use the word dual, they use the word, oh, Geminis are fickle, or, Geminis are inconsistent. I think that's more Gemini. I think Pandit Oja is right, and that people in the first half of a dual sign are fixed and the second half are movable, but something we have to play with. Okay, qualities of signs, the Gunas. Tamasic, again, Tamasic means material, and the world is very material, and we need to be material. We like our cars and our bank accounts. But Tamasic can be lazy, attached. There can be dullness there. Rajasic, active, searching, agitated, fiery. Sattvic, pure, sweet, and truthful. So here's a list of the signs. Aries is Rajasic, Taurus is Rajasic, Gemini is all three. Cancer, Sattvic, Leo, Sattvic. The way to remember them is Jupiter. The Jupiter signs and the Sun and the Moon signs, Cancer and Leo, are the Sattvic ones. Again, the Sun and the Moon are so important, and Jupiter is always the most benefic planet. Saturn and Mars signs are Tamasic. I'm missing the word Mars here. And Scorpio, so Virgo is also considered a Tamasic sign, which doesn't make any sense to me. And again, I'm just telling you what the classics tell us. And Venus-ruled signs are Rajasic, and also Aries and Gemini is considered Rajasic. So it's good to remember those because so the whole purpose of this sidebar was you have to know the guna and the fixed, movable, dual qualities to kind of know what the mental thought process is. So that's why we did that. So Gunas of the planets, Moon and Jupiter are Sattvic, Mars and Saturn are Tamasic, Mercury, Venus, and the Sun are Rajasic. So here's another fancy Sanskrit word called Shubhapati, and it just means moon sign. And so the sign that the moon is in is very important for coloring the mental character of a person. So obviously, if the moon is in Sagittarius or Pisces, it's right. Pisces is a Sattvic, is in Jupiter's sign. It's very Sattvic. Moon in Pisces is obviously joyous and optimistic and things like that. Moon in Capricorn or Aquarius is the opposite, right? Owned by Saturn or Rahu, more pessimistic, more gloomy. Very basic information. I mean, if you're just quickly, trying to remember the mental nature of the person, what sign is the moon in? What is it in a fixed sign? Is it in a dual sign? Are they kind of are they a stuck person? Moon in Scorpio is a real problem because it's not only kind of gloomy and dark, but it's a fixed sign, so it's kind of stuck. So one has to kind of think about this. If Venus is the ruler of if the moon is in Taurus or Libra, the person's mind will be creative and artistic and have a lot of sensual desire. Saturn's the ruler, they're grave, melancholic. If Rahu's the ruler, as in the case of Aquarius, lots of ideas, very inventive, but they may drain their energy. So, whenever we're thinking about the moon sign, will just tell us about the mental quality of the person. If Jupiter is the ruler of the moon sign, Pisces or Sagittarius moon, then the thoughts will be good and noble and directed towards knowledge and good memory. And then you have to think, is the moon sign exalted or debilitated, right? Even if let's say Saturn's exalted in Libra, and let's say the moon's in Libra, and say the moon is in Capricorn or Aquarius, but Saturn, the dispositor, is in Libra. Actually, that moon is not as bad as if the Saturn were in Aries. So the moon sign will be affected also by where the Lord is. Is it exalted? Is it debilitated? Very important. Okay, we've kind of gone over this again. The moon, a little bit more detail here. The moon is our mind and our personality and our nature, and our decision-making ability is the rising sign. Now, if you put Jupiter in the first house or the seventh house, it makes the rising sign very strong, and the person is able to control his mental and emotional nature. So Jupiter in the first is one of the best placements in a chart for that reason, because it immediately creates a person with good solid judgment, very anchored, very stable, very sweet, very noble, very emotionally stable. And my wife has Jupiter in the first house, and she's like that. Her chart's in this in many other ways. But Jupiter in the first just takes care of so many things in the chart. It's like one of the best things. When you put the moon in a Kendra, 1, 4, 7, or 10, you'll see that a lot, obviously. It can make the moon too strong, and that makes, when the moon is strong, then it may be more impulsive. It may give into its desire nature and not be able to, the Lagna may not be able to overtake it. And then aspects and conjunctions to the moon impact the quality of the mind. Jupiter aspects obviously make it joyous, and Saturn more gloomy. Now, there's another fancy Sanskrit word called the Jamna Nakshatra, which many of you know. This is the nakshatra that the moon is at birth, and I mentioned this earlier. The Vedic astrologers think this is like the most important thing in the universe, and I was doing some research on this because I never really understood it. Well, first of all, the nakshatra, the moon's nakshatra starts the sequence of dashas that you're born with. So, for example, I was born in Jestha, which is ruled by Mercury. And so my dasha period started with Mercury, and then it went to K2, Venus, in that order. So, but what it turns out is that the planet, the owner of the Jamna Nakshatra becomes the most karmic focus of the chart. And this is something that no one teaches. And I was thinking about this in my chart. So I'm Jestha, which is ruled by Mercury, and we'll look at your charts in a minute. Maybe we'll take a break and look at your charts. I'm Jestha, so that makes I'm Scorpio rising. So Jestha is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is actually not a good planet for Scorpio rising. And Jestha is a pretty kind of nasty nakshatra. But it makes my focus 8th and 11th house. Because Mercury owns the 8th and 11th for Scorpios, and Mercury is in the 4th house in my chart. So again, I'll pull up my chart again to make this concrete. So Moon here at 26 degrees is in Jestha. Mercury, the Lord of Jestha, Nakshatra, is in the 4th house, and Mercury owns the 8th house, Gemini, and the 11th house, Virgo, right? So, so interesting if you think about my life. What has my life been? I've been involved in astrology for 30 years, 8th house, right? I'm a financial astrologer, 11th house. Mercury in the fourth house is connected to mother. Mercury doesn't do very well in the fourth house. It's one of the poorer placements of it. And the fourth house is an emotional place of happiness, and Mercury is always questioning, why am I not happy? So when I thought about Jestia, that my life started in Mercury Dasha and that Mercury becomes the focal point of my life, is very accurate. And we'll look at your charts and your rising nakshatra lords and seeing if that's true. It's something for you to think about. But that's why the rising nakshatra lord is very important. And then you have to see where the lord of the nakshatra is placed, and that will influence the nature of the chart. So again, my Mercury in the fourth house becomes a very kind of core issue in my life. And the central question, why I'm a Jyotishi connected to 8th house, why am I not happy? Moon in the first house, moon's not, fourth natural house is Cancer, which is, I've got Mercury in the fourth house. Why am I not happy? So my Mercury is always trying to decide, why am I not happy? And I became a Jyotishi searching for moksha because 8th house activity, because I'm not happy, and my moon, and that came from my mother and that kind of thing. So it really is kind of a core influence and something to think about. It may be a good starting point for trying to find a core of a person's being and looking at what their Jamna Nakshatra is, what their lord is, where is it placed, what houses does it own. Very, very kind of key. If the nakshatra lord is an enemy of the chart, then it also causes a problem. So in my case, Mercury is actually the worst planet for a Scorpio rising. It owns the 8th house and the 11th house. It affects health. So Mercury periods in the past have been really difficult health periods for me, and Mercury in the fourth house, I have to worry about heart problems with Mercury in the fourth house. Half of the heart is there. But so you can kind of see very key, is the nakshatra lord an enemy of the Lagna lord? I mean, in some of your cases it isn't, and you don't. It gives you immediate information. It's a very important piece of information. Let's stop and take questions. Maybe we can quickly look at a few charts, trying not to go too fast so we can do more charts. I'm unmuting you. Any questions on anything that I covered? You can look at a couple other charts some of them I don't have yet, so you'll send them to me, but let's see who I do have. Let's look at Venus chart. It's really good to have you in class here, Venus. I think I have the right version here. Okay, so your rising nakshatra is Rahu. Right, it's Shatabisha, owned by Rahu. So you started your life in a Rahu period. You probably started midway through the Rahu period. I guess it's better to get it over through the first part of your childhood than in your teenage years. And Rahu in your chart is in the fourth with Saturn, again affecting happiness. And Rahu owns the 11th house. It's the owner of Aquarius. So that connects Rahu to the 7th house, which is relationships. So it suggests that, this life, one of the major life lessons of this chart is relationship. Rahu, again, is a very creative planet. Rahu in the fourth house is Saturn is creating anxiety around happiness. Why am I not happy? And, spurring you to meditation and things like that. So, Saurabhishak is also a healing planet. And Rahu and Saurabhishak, I think, Rahu is actually pretty, it's in its sign of weakness in Scorpio, but it's in a good nakshatra, which is a very spiritual nakshatra. Both Saturn and Rahu are in Anuradha, which is one of the most spiritual nakshatras. So that Rahu is getting a very spiritual quality from its placement and spurring you to kind of moksha and spiritual growth. Anyway. Anything you want to add to what I said?
Yeah, all that's true. The Saturn and Rahu during the Saturn period was really great, actually, because it spurred me on spiritually, which, you know, any sort of happiness, which is temporary happiness was kind of like, you know, it's like inconsequential, you know what I mean? It's like, who cares? And then, you know, so it spurs you on to spiritual growth. So I was thinking about that, you know, because I'm actually quite a happy person. So, but what did it was I think the Saturn and the Rahu, you know, even more so than having the lovely Jupiter there in the first house. Or maybe that's just what made me positive about Saturn and Rahu. So.
Yeah, good. Yeah, Jupiter in the first house takes care of everything. It's really blessings of the guru right in the ascendant. So gives you good judgment and you know, very powerful. Let's quickly look at the sun, moon, and the ascendant here. So the ascendant lord is the sun, so they're the same. The ascendant is in the sun's own nakshatra, which is very powerful. So again, sun is karaka for soul, so there's a lot of deep soul and spiritual connections immediately just by the sun being its own nakshatra, the ascendant its own nakshatra, the sun 2 degrees from the ascendant lord. So it's very kind of powerful sun chart in that respect. The moon obviously is more problematic, being afflicted by Mars, but Mars is at least a good planet for. But the moon obviously is a little bit more gloomy, right? Because it's in Aquarius, which is connected to Rahu and Saturn. It's connected to Mars. So the moon is not very strong in your chart, you know. And then the sun chart.
Other than being the day before full.
Yeah, right.
That makes it strong and weak at the same time, right?
Right. Yeah, to me, the moon is always a problem for Leos because it owns the 12th house. I mean, the sun and the moon are the luminaries, so they're always so important, and they're always best friends. But Leos have trouble with emotions anyway, and they have trouble with their mind in that respect. So it's kind of interesting. Let's do another one real quickly. We can find somebody else.
Hey, Barry, just a quick question.
Yeah.
Hey, so I've, you know, many places I end up reading and hearing that the sun and the luminaries, sun and the moon being luminaries, they're really hard to, even in bad placements, it's hard to keep them down forever, and that at a certain point in time in your life, they do shine through and they will help the houses they are in. Is that kind of just like a myth-like thing? I mean, I've even heard, like, for example, people place more importance to the moon chart, or rather, like, you know, using the moon as the ascendant after you get to an age of 50 and stuff like that. So is there anything to, is that just a myth? Is there folklore sort of thing?
Yeah, good question. There are different opinions on that. I mean, I always think that, you know, the moon is connected to childhood. So I think because children are much more in their emotional nature. So I think the moon is very important in a childhood chart. You know, and there's a type of dasha that it says the sun kind of ripens between. The sun shows its energy between age 50 and 70. So certainly the sun chart, when you're kind of very maturely in your career, really shines forth in your you know, at the age of 50. But I can't remember what age the moon ripens. I have to look it up. But I always think I know it's always connected to childhood in some, but there's a whole type of dasha that works very well, just is connected to the fact, like, Saturn starts at age 70, you know, and the sun is at 50, and I forgot, I haven't memorized all of those. Again, that's the problem with Jyotish, but I can't remember what the years are for the moon. I'll look it up, though. It's a good question. It's 4:20. Let's keep moving. Any other questions? What if Jupiter is a malefic? Okay, good question, Mary. Yeah, Jupiter can be a functional malefic for certain charts, obviously for Taurus and Libra, and, you know, for Gemini and Virgo. Jupiter is a functional malefic. And functional malefics are very funny in that they, you know, Jupiter is always bringing good to wherever it goes because it's a natural benefic, but it can cause, like, false optimism I find that Jupiter as a functional malefic makes people like falsely optimistic about things that they shouldn't be. So whenever I see Taurus rising and Libra rising and they're in a Jupiter period or Jupiter's impacting their chart, I'm kind of warning them like, you have to be very Saturnian. Is this real? Are there facts, to back up what you're optimistic about? Don't get caught up in false hopes. I still think Jupiter, my wife is Libra rising and she's got Jupiter in the first, and she's an incredible person, and so it as a functional malefic, she's been overweight her whole life, so Jupiter, and it's given her diabetes, so that's how it's manifested as a functional malefic in the first house, but it still makes her an incredible person with Jupiter in the first part. Her personality, her judgment is just impeccable. So, everything has like a mixed side to it. Good question. Okay.
Hi Barry, Wade. I have a question. If the moon is in a nakshatra of the nodes, and then do the nodes have then a very profound impact on the psyche and the chart of the person? And would it be beneficial or would it be Janus-based?
Everything is beneficial because it's what we've come in this life to learn. So I don't ever think anything is bad. I hate using the word good or bad in astrology. It kind of is. It's kind of karmically what we've inherited. And there's always a positive way of looking at anything. I think Moon Rahu connections can make people very psychic. I just did a chart yesterday, and this woman gets, really clear psychic dreams, and they're really accurate. And she's a visionary. So Moon and Rahu's nakshatra can make people very creative. Again, Rahu, you took the class last semester, which we talked about Rahu a lot, and there's a lot of incredible positive. Rahu's very creative. It's very inventive. It's a rebel. Those can be good qualities. So I don't ever kind of label anything good or bad. Good question.
Yeah, but I mean, Rahu and the moon, doesn't Rahu cause generally a lot of angst to keep wanting to do more and to constantly have desires?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right. I mean, I was trying to find a positive way of talking about Moon Rahu connection, but and I gave you some positive examples. I mean, if it's very afflicted, again, you have to look at, again, I had a chart yesterday where it was both Moon and Rahu were exalted in Taurus. So that was an example where the person, I mean, it was such a kind of mixed bag. I mean, their mother committed suicide, but they're totally psychic and they're incredibly creative, and they've had all kinds of emotional angst, but it's made them a deeper person and it's spurred them to spirituality. So everything, has a purpose. There may be times in your life where the Moon Rahu is kind of connecting, it's creating incredible psychosis that you get into drugs and alcohol because you can't deal with it. But then you bottom out and you get into meditation and you get lifted up and you become this incredible creative being. And that's what just happened to this person I did a chart for. So I think it's all part of a journey. It has all of it,
Thanks.
Do you get stuck in any one part of it? Some people get stuck. If it's really malefic, if it's in Scorpio where it's debilitated and it's got two malefic aspects, the person may not get out of it. They may become suicidal. They may, end up in drug rehab or something like that. And they may eventually get out of it, and some people don't get out of those really bad placements. So you have to look at all the colorations. Good question. Okay. Sonara's joining us from Mumbai, so it's great. Okay, so let's move on. We still have a lot of material as always. Never can believe how much of a fire engine I have here. Okay, I'm going to let you, this is kind of cookbook material, so I'm going to let you kind of just look at this. Moon conjunctions, again, the key is planets within a 5-degree aspect going through a nakshatra, exchange of houses, all those are the associations. Conjunct within 5 degrees, aspecting within 5 degrees. So sometimes you get Moon at 29 degrees and Jupiter at 1 degree. They're in the opposite parts of the sign. You can't it's not really a true conjunction because they're really far apart. When it's really impactful, it's like 5 degrees. So remember that 5-degree rule by aspect or conjunction. And then you can look at all the qualities of the moon conjunction. To me, what's interesting, we talked about full moon, strong spiritual quality, benefic quality, waxing moon, stubborn, defective in speech, that kind of thing. This is the part that to me is the most fascinating that I want to spend time on today, and these are the yogas. And I used to really kind of rebel against yogas because they have all these names and there's so many of them. So I came up with a way for you to learn them. And these are worth learning because they happen a lot. These are yogas connected to the moon, and they really impact the chart, and it's how you have to read a moon chart. So it turns out, and I'm going to give you the names, and you can do with what you like, but basically planets that are second from the moon. This happens all the time. This is called the Sunafa Yoga. Okay. What this is about, this is what I'm getting into now is how we judge a moon chart. And I've got a cookbook on it that summarizes at the end. But basically, this is the part of how to judge a moon chart. We don't judge it in a traditional, we don't take the moon chart and say, okay, second house is money, second house from the moon is money. Well, it's a little bit true, but it's not. So we have to know how to judge a moon chart, and this is what we're going to do now. This is why we have this whole lesson. So the first thing we look at is at the second house from the moon. If there's a planet in the second house from the moon, it's about gains from office, college, and social status. Now you can remember second is gains, so that's easy to remember. Gains in profession. You put Jupiter second from the moon, person can be very successful at their career, right? They're going to have good social status. They're going to be good in college. You put Venus second from the moon. Same thing. Happiness in career, happiness in college, happiness in social status. Malefic second from the moon. I have Rahu second from the moon. Causes tension in career. I've had a very successful career, but it hasn't been a happy career. Again, moon is happiness. A malefic second from my moon. Not really happiness from career. What is my career about? Rahu. I'm in trading. I'm in investment. I'm in a Rahu career. The moon is second from my moon, and it's a very tense profession. I can't say it creates incredible happiness. Supposedly, malefics second from the moon get better in time. Maybe after 30 years, I'm used to it, but maybe not. Anafa Yoga, this is 12th from the moon. So it turns out, this is something that I just recently learned, the planets that are second and 12th from the moon are almost the two most important planets in the chart for judging happiness in certain ways, because second house happiness from career, 12th house happiness from family, home, and spouse. And again, people forget 12th house is about sacrifice. 12th house is marriage, actually, too. People always think 7th house is marriage, but 12th house is marriage, which is sacrifice for children. So the 12th house from the moon shows you who you share a bed with. Are you happy with that bed? If Rahu's in the 12th house from your moon, your partner may be a foreigner. If Mars is 12th from your moon, Mars is the celibate planet. It may celibacy. Mars is the keyword for Mars is always fighting. Whenever you see Mars, it wants to fight. It likes to fight. So 12th moon 12th from your moon, you're going to fight in your marriage. Saturn in the 12th from your moon. Again, it may cause death and disease. I have Saturn 12th from my moon, but it's exalted. But I would say that my marriage is very Saturnian. It's very kind of service-oriented. It's been about sacrifice for a guru. It's been, I can't say there's not a lot of happiness. There's a lot of things you have to look at, but in general, I would say I do have a Saturn moon for my marriage. It's 12th my moon. Rahu and Ketu in the 12th can create affairs in marriage, disloyalty. Venus, 12 from the moon, a benefic, love of family, guru, 12 from the moon, knowledge and respect and tolerance in marriage. Your knowledge is about getting, your marriage is about getting marriage. Mercury connected to business and money, so your marriage may be about money and gifts. So the second and the 12th from the moon are very, very important placements, something you want to look at first in the chart. Now, there's something that I really want to teach you sometime. I may try to squeeze it in. It's called Argala. And the order, Argala, there are these kind of pairs of planets that are very key in your chart. If you have more planets second from a planet, or then you have 12 from the planet, it's good. Like you have benefic second from any planet or any house, it's a good thing. And if you have more planets and they're malefic and they're 12th from a planet, it's kind of a difficult placement. So the order of these yogas is around what are called these argalas, and I have to teach these to you. But there's a reason that we're doing. There's a natural connection in the astrology, which again I'll have to send you an article about it. The second and the 12th houses are always paired together, and then the first and the 7th houses are paired together. Then we'll go to the 6th and the 8th houses are paired together. The 4th and the 10th houses are paired together, and the 9th and the 5th houses are paired together, and the 3rd and the 11th houses are paired together. These are all connected to Argala, and in any chart that you look at, particularly the moon chart, you're always looking at the connections. Are there more planets? Are there good planets in the second? Are there more good planets in the second than there are in the 12th? Are there more good planets in the 5th and the 9th? Are there more good planets in the 7th and the 1st and the 7th? Because these, there's kind of a balancing act, and this is something that's really important, and I probably should send you an article on it because I'm not sure we have an hour to do a lesson on it, but that's why I have this order. So planets 7 from the moon show the mind's desire from past lives. It's our subjective experience. So it creates an obsession by the mind. This is a big thing. So it's kind of like Rahu. We know wherever Rahu goes, it creates a strong desire. But planets 7 from the moon are just as important. They create an unquestionable thirst. Mercury 7 from the moon, obsession about education. Jupiter 7 from the moon, obsession about knowledge. Venus 7th from the moon, obsession about sex, women, and enjoyments. Sun obsessed from full moons against Sun 7th from the moon, obsessed with spiritual knowledge. Rahu Ketu 7th from the moon, they always create obsession anyway, so you're doubling the obsession. So look at the 7th house from the moon for showing what the person's desire nature is, aside from Rahu. That's really important for doing a chart, and that's why the 7th from the moon is very important. The other thing about the 7th from the moon is it becomes the outer manifestation. It becomes an indicator of life path. So that's why the 7th from the moon is very important for our interaction with groups, with people, with the public. So Jupiter in the 7th may make them a teacher or a leader or a coach. It's how we, the moon represents our public image, right? And so 7th from the moon is our interaction with society. So when Jupiter is 7th from the moon, it means that we're a teacher or a leader or a coach in society. If Venus is 7th from the moon, it creates somebody who's in management. Again, Venus is a business planet, or somebody who's an entertainer. Saturn 7th from the moon, social worker, hardworking person, working with the sick or the elderly. Sun 7th from the moon, working with spiritual groups. Planets will show the groups you'd like to associate with in the public. Malefic planets may create bad groups. You know, you find out people who, 11th house is the house you look at for groups, but the 7th from the moon, if you get a malefic, the 7th from the moon, the person's going to have trouble in groups. You know, you put Rahu in the 7th, they never do well in groups. You put Saturn in the 7th, same problem. The 7th from the moon heavily impacts marriage. So there's the other pairing now is the 6th and the 8th house. This is another Argala. In the 6th house...
I was just wondering, what is Mercury when it's 7th from the moon?
Yeah, I said it's about an obsession with education.
Oh, okay.
Learning, yeah. Okay, so 6 from the moon, the 6th-8th pair goes together in Argala. So this house shows mental pain due to our own weakness. So the 6th house we know is kind of a Upachaya house. It's a place of kind of weakness. We need discipline to get through the 6th house, right? The ascendant is strong. We're disciplined to stay on our diet, to stay away from drugs and alcohol. But the 6th house from the moon creates mental pain. To study planets here to show your own mental weaknesses in life. Malefics here show that you're a fighter, right? We always say malefics, you want malefics in the 6th. You know, it doesn't make fights easy, but you are a fighter. Benefics in the 6th actually make you kind of a soft person, which means that you don't get into fights and you end up being a nice guy and you don't stand up for yourself. It's a problem. I have this problem. So 6th house from the moon shows whether you're a fighter or if you're a good person that avoids conflicts, and that can be a problem. Sometimes we need to fight a little bit to stand our ground. Otherwise, people take advantage of us. So Jupiter in the 6th from the moon, you might make money from teaching and consulting. Venus, 6th from the moon, will create involvement with art or partying, things like that. Okay, the 8th house, which is the other pair that goes with the 6th house. I'm missing a slide here. The 8th house, again, is always about...
All right, I'm not seeing any of these slides. I just see my chart still. Are the slides up?
Okay, I don't know why that is. I will take your chart down. Are you seeing it now?
Yeah, it's still there.
Isn't that funny? Well, it's your chart. Yeah. It won't go away.
The chart that won't go away, that's a scary thought.
Yeah, everybody else is seeing it, right? The slides?
No, I can't see the slides either.
Oh, wow. Why is that? Let's see. I'll turn off the webcam. Now it's not doing screen share. Well, I did send you copies of them, and it's really annoying not to see the slides.
There's nothing there, yeah.
I know. I'm trying to figure out what this is. This is technical witch of the day. I got through the power failure, and now I can't show you the slides. The only thing I can do is I can log off and log on, which is absolutely, will take us 10 minutes for it all to get back on. The only thing you can do is I sent you the slideshow, is put it up on your screen and just go to the 8th from the moon, just go to the, that page. That's the only thing I can think of doing. I don't know why it's not working. I am getting this whole problem where I'm pushing the button and it's not doing it. Okay, actually I am getting some choices here. Okay, I think it's working now. Okay, you seeing it now? Guys, you seeing it?
No, I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, I just changed the setting and supposedly it's right. I'm really sorry. So the only thing you can do is pull up the slideshow that I sent you. If anybody knows how to fix this, let me know. It should be working, but it's not. And I don't know why. But it's 3:40, so I'm sorry about that. Okay, so just listen, and then if you really want to see the slideshow, then just go to the email I sent. I'm really sorry. That's the worst thing that happened today after losing power for 10 hours and having a dog in the hospital. I think we're doing good.
Thanks. I have a quick question. In the chart where you say moon conjunctions, when you say that when the moon is in a good sign and in a good house and not aspected by malefic, it's good. But what if it's in its own sign like mine, but it's in the 12th? I don't know how to understand that. Would that be considered a weak position because it's in the 12th house, or is it average because it's also in Cancer?
Yeah, 12th house is always a tricky position. If it It's always 1,000 shades of gray, and we have to kind of look at how that shows up positively in your life. And I think we looked at your chart. It is Lord of the 12th, and the 12th is, conjunct Jupiter, so it creates luck with, with foreign husbands and foreign travels and islands and things like that. So that's kind of how it's showing up in your chart. It still could make you emotionally meditative or distant or not in tune with your emotions. And Moon in the 12th house, has its bright side too. You can review the Moon in the 12th house from our lesson on the 12th house from last semester. I'm going to move on so that we can get through these slides. So I'm going to start having to go a little bit faster. Okay, so 8th house from the Moon, the key word here is transformation. It's the hidden place of our mind that is secret, and it becomes a cause of disease, suffering, and death, but also transformation. So Ketu in the 8th house is self-destructive. It may not think, and it will act too quickly and impulsively. Ketu has no head, right? Mars in the 8th house wants to fight, and it will use fighting to transform. Saturn in the 12th house causes pain and difficulty, and the pain causes us to transform our life. Sun in the 8th house from the Moon causes spiritual transformation, or transformation through government or father. Jupiter in the 8th house, transformation through teachers or children. I have that one. Venus in the 8th house, transformation from the spouse, partner, or artistic expression. So the quality of the sign shows you what you need to understand to transform. It also reveals those who secretly hurt you and whom you've hurt. So 8th house can be secret enemies as well. Keyword is how we transform. Benefics in the 8th house from the Moon show good transformations leading to success, good finance, and luck that will manifest in that dasha. Fourth from the Moon. So then the pairing between the 4th is always the 10th house. That's the Argala relationship. And we talked about that last semester. The 4th house is home. The 10th house is work. There's a kind of a dichotomy from wanting to be home and secure and being out in the world and working. So 4th house is mother on home and destiny. Malefics here create death or disease with mother. The 4th house can affect health. It's connected to security. Again, 4th house is cancer, security, home. The Moon shows hobbies and subjects of interest. So 4th from the Moon is a place to look for somebody's hobbies. Somebody sometimes will say, I have no hobbies. You have to look at what's going on in the 4th house from the Moon. Saturn transiting the 4th house create health problems and depression. It's one of those really bad transits. 10th from the Moon, it will get used quite a bit. We can have a whole lesson on 10th from the Moon for career and career, but 10th from the Moon shows us the job and career you would like to do, because again the Moon is happiness. The 10th from the Moon is the career that makes you happy. So again, one way of always looking at the Moon chart is the placements from the Moon are what makes you happy, right? So the 10th from the Moon will tell us where and when you start your work and career, and it could put together like a half-hour lesson on, like, based on what planets you have in your Moon chart, you need to move in a direction to get a job, in fact. And I had a whole advanced class on this. It was quite fascinating. So let's say you have Mercury in your 10th house from the Moon, and Mercury is connected to the north, and let's say if Mercury's in a movable sign like Aries or something like that, it means if you move north and far away from your home, you'll get a good career. And the person who gave a presentation on this was quite fascinating to show that, how well it worked. I actually use it in helping people if they need to move for career. But so 10th from the Moon is very powerful for showing about where to move for work, and certainly can show you a lot about career. It's said that if you were born at night during the time of the Moon, that your career is more fortunate. The number of planets 10th from your Moon will show how many careers you may have, from the lowest to the highest degrees. So the planet with the highest degrees is usually the strongest career planet, and the planet with the lowest degrees is less strong. And again, it may be, again, benefics are good in the 10th, malefics cause, like Saturn, create change of jobs. But every planet, just all planets are good 10th from the Moon. It's one of those magical placements. So you want to have planets 10th from the Moon. Ninth from the moon, again, ninth goes with the fifth house. The ninth house is actually a challenging planet because it's about spiritual pilgrimages and gurus. We're leaving the fifth house, which is kind of our children and our creative abilities, and going out into the world. So those kind of two are at odds sometimes. The ninth house from the moon shows what we like to do at all times. So it's another level of hobby. It will indicate who we listen to. It represents our philosophy of life, our security. Venus here will require a relationship to feel secure. Mars here needs celibacy and an independent will. Ketu here needs to feel, have property. Ketu is connected to Mars and property and apartment buildings to feel secure. Saturn here will require job and career and health to be secure. So ninth from the moon is really important for showing what makes us feel secure, who we listen to, what we like to do. And it's kind of an important thing. It's not something you think about. Malefics, ninth from the moon, cause fear and security. We need to go through your charts for examples, and we're going to do that at the end of the class. But I want to go through all the slides here. Third from the moon. The third always goes with the 11th house. And there's planets in the third get positive Argala, planets in the 11th get negative Argala. This house shows continual worries of the mind. Sometimes they're imaginary. What will satisfy the mind? So third from the moon, it defines what we enjoy. It shows how much you need to rest in order to unwind. It's something that no one ever teaches. When people need rest, the planet in the third house shows you how much rest you need to get. Saturn needs a whole year of rest. Rahu 8 months, Ketu 3 months, Mercury 2 months, Venus 2 weeks, Sun 6 months, Mars 1 day, Guru 1 month. How many people can take a whole year off for Saturn? I don't know. How many people can take 8 months off for Rahu? I don't know. I mean, maybe Venus 2 weeks for vacation you can get away with. If you're lucky, Guru 1 month, but most of the other ones are not really practical in terms of modern vacation life. Sometimes you get forced rest, right? Third from the moon shows which path you want to choose and what movement we need to do to fulfill our dreams. Ketu does the worst here and destroys mental peace. No planet here. Study the Lord in its house. Kimadruga Yoga. This is important, but if you don't have any planets second or 12th from the moon is considered isolated. So that's, remember I said, the most important thing to look at, are there planets second and 12th from the moon? The moon needs that support. If the moon doesn't have that support, it feels unsupported. It's alone. No planets in the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th is another form of Kimadruga Yoga. It may show a lack of desires. It promotes spirituality. And it may be bad for material abundance. People want to kind of run off and meditate all the time. I was thinking about this, my chart. I've got Saturn 12th from my moon, and I've got Rahu 2nd from my moon, and they're both malefics, and they cause problems. But they have their, it's good to have planets 2nd and 12th from the moon. They're promoting desire in my life. They're moving me forward in life. So when you don't have planets 2nd and 12th from the moon, it causes a problem. These are yogas connected to Jupiter and the moon. They're very common when the moon is 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th. I'll let you go through this. I want to go on to examples. Otherwise, we're going to get lost here. Some of the stuff. Okay, here's what I want to kind of summarize with. Are you guys seeing the slides? I don't know. So I want to summarize what we just did, because this is how we do moon charts, okay? So you want to print out these pages for your cookbook. And for homework, you should practice on your chart or somebody else's chart, because we have to practice doing moon charts, otherwise we're never going to know how to do them, because they're done differently, right? So the first thing we look at a moon chart is should we focus on doing the moon chart? Are they in a moon mahadasha? Are they Cancer rising? Are they a woman? Is the moon really strong? That's a really good reason to start with the moon chart, right? Secondly, what is the moon's nakshatra? We learned that at the beginning of the lesson. How is the dispositor impacting the focus of the person's life? and we did a couple examples of that. The nakshatra that you're born in is a huge impact on your whole life and on the person's life and the focus of the chart. So you really can spend a lot of time talking about it. What sign is the moon in, right? We said moon's in Pisces. It's going to be optimistic. It's in Cancer. It's obviously going to be home and secure. Moon's in Leo. It's happy. Obviously, it's another sattvic sign. Moon in Rahu. It's restless. It's depressed in Aquarius. So it tells you something about, and you have to help. A lot of people need help with their mental health, you know, and often meditation is the best cure for the moon. What planets is the moon conjunct? How is it influencing the moon, right? So moon conjunct Jupiter gives it hope and it allows it to get through problems. Moon conjunct Saturn, hopeless, despair. You've got to really help these people when they have moon-Saturn connections. What planet is the moon opposing? What are our obsessions in life, right? So again, in the same way we look at Rahu and Ketu in a chart to see what the person's desire nature is, what is a seventh house from the moon? What sign is seventh house from the moon? That gives us a focus of what the person is obsessed with in their life. So here is a summary of the principles that we went through. So we said the second and the 12th house are the most important planets that the moon, you want moon to have planets second and the 12th in the house. Second house gains of career, social status. 12th house, our attitude towards our family, our spouse, our relationship. 7th house, what the mind is obsessed with. 6th house, what are their mental pains? Again, you know, the value of Jyotish is sometimes helping reveal people see things that they don't see. In analyzing the moon chart, sometimes you can help people verbalize what's going on in their mind. And what's going on in their mind sometimes is very abstract. You know, they not have a handle on it. And if you tell them, you know, some of these principles, you're giving them insight into their mind. It's very, very, very exciting. 8th house, what are the keys to the moon's transformations? You know, if Jupiter is 8th from the moon, they need a guru, right? Because the guru will help them transform. A teacher will help them transform. Venus, 8th from the moon, they need a wife to transform their life. They need artistic development to transform their life. They need music to transform their life. So think of all the significations. So 8th from the moon, what do they need to transform their life? 4th and 10th from the moon, again, that's another pair that goes together. It's dealing with home and security versus career. 10th from the moon is very important whenever you do career in somebody's chart. 10th is very important. I gave you an example of, you know, I'll have to do a talk sometime on 10th from the moon and you know, change of career and direction in life and stuff like that. But it's very, very important. Something that nobody ever looks at. 4th from the moon, you know, happiness is very connected to health. You have to remember to look at that. 9th and the 5th house go together in Argala. 9th from the moon, that shows what we like to do at all times, our philosophy, our security. 5th house, what we adore. Again, 9th and 5th house are always good houses. So again, examine the 9th and the 5th houses from the moon. 11th from the moon, this house will show enjoyment and illusions of the mind. 3rd from the moon shows what we worry about. That's important too, because you see that a lot. What do we worry about is a key question. I want to do some practice with this. I'll try to send you this cookbook sheet. It's not in your slides. I made another transparency for it, so I'll send you that as a workshop. And for homework, I want you to work on your moon charts and go through 2nd, 12th, 7th, you know, 6th, 8th, 4th, 10th, and analyze these tendencies, and then maybe make a presentation from your chart. Those of you who are open to presenting in public, I think would be great. It's how we practice, and because you know yourself better than I know you, you're gonna do that. I'll practice a little bit with my chart now, since I know my chart. And then we'll talk about the Rashi chart, and then we'll go home. Any quick questions?
Barry, when you say no planets, first, fourth, seventh, or 10th, do you mean all of them, or do you mean one of them?
All of them.
All of them, okay. And similarly, without planets in the 2nd and 12th, or 2nd or 12th?
If you'd have no planets in the 2nd and 12th. If you have a planet in the 2nd, it's good. If you have a planet in the 12th, it's actually good from the moon. You don't want the moon without company. The moon's, you know, it's a social creature. It wants to be with people. It doesn't like to be alone, you know. Causes problems when it doesn't have any connections.
Okay.
Okay. Any other quick questions? I mean, I want to apply these principles to my moon chart, because I could do that one quickly. And if I can do another chart, I will.
I just had a quick comment about Sonera's question, though, Barry.
Yeah.
So usually, like the second house from a house, that also indicates the foods or the resources that go to contributing to that house. So second from the moon is basically what's feeding the moon or giving it strength.
Right.
And in turn, 12th from the moon is basically what is your mind supporting. So that's where the 2nd and 12th come in.
Right. Right. Thank you. Wonderful observation. Yeah. But very important, this is something I've just actually recently learned in the last year, that 2nd and 12th from the moon are two of the most important things in the chart. It's something that no one ever taught me, but it's really, really important. We need to practice with it and just see how it manifests in your charts in your life. But I'm going to put you on mute. I'm going to pull up, maybe I'll try to pull up my chart because I probably could do it quickly. Okay, and again, I apologize I don't have the southern style up. Again, I'll get that fixed for next week. So Scorpio rising, you know, 8 for Scorpio, moon in the first house. So, let's go through. So we've got second.
Barry, nothing's really showing up on the screen.
I don't know why it's okay. Okay, I just switched it. Is it showing up now? Is it?
Yes, it just showed up. Yes.
Okay, so I finally found a setting that I'd never seen before. Thank you for letting me know that I actually have to show what. If I have too many pages open, it doesn't know what to share, and so it gives me a choice. So that's something I just learned after all these years of using this program. Isn't that funny? Okay, so okay, so here's my chart again. So 2nd and the 12th house from the moon. Again, my chart is not a good example. By the way, let me do Partho's chart. Maybe I can get it to work. The reason my chart isn't a good example is because I have moon in the first house. It's not different. It is different from my natal chart, but it's also similar to my natal chart. I'm going to put up Sonora because you're here. Okay, I think we have the right chart, right? Okay, so first of all, let's change the settings in Sri Joshi Star. We can put up the moon chart, okay? So here's the moon chart, and so we can just read the moon chart separately as a different chart. So first of all, we're looking at what Nakshatra is the moon in, and we talked about this already, that she was born, we haven't actually, she was born with the moon in Mercury's Nakshatra, which is Ashalesha, and Ashalesha owns the 3rd and the 12th house for, I'm sorry, it owns the Mercury owns the 2nd and the 11th house in her chart. So money and friends and family are very important in her life. Mercury's in the 11th house. Ashalesha Nakshatra has a lot to do with, I just wrote an article about it, sharp tongue, actually. The lesson of Ashalesha is not to speak badly about people, because you can tend to kind of gossip about people and speak ill about them. So and so she was born into a Mercury period, in connection to 2nd and 11th, 2nd being family. I'm gonna and I'm gonna mute you, Sonara, in case you want to add anything.
No, I mean, I think I used to be a lot more argumentative and stuff, but I think with time I've sort of balanced my speech, and my focus is now very much my career.
Right, and that we'll get to rotation of the chart. I was just talking about what you were born with, but I'm just usually the rising nakshatra, the Jaimini nakshatra, should be a part of your whole life. And I was just, we'll have to, but you're not seeing that now. I don't know you well enough. So, okay, so 2nd and 12th from the moon. So we've got 2 planets, 2nd from the moon, Rahu and Saturn. And so how are gains from office, colleagues, and social status impacted from these placements? Again, there are 2 malefics, but we still like having planets 2nd from the moon, because it does bring gains in career. I mean, we said that Rahu 2nd from the moon in career might create tension at work. Is that true? In your life, do you have a lot of, I mean, I would think Rahu and Saturn would create a lot of tension at work for you.
Yeah, I do get stressed out about it. Yeah, because I have a private practice. I'm a psychologist, so yeah, sometimes I get stressed out with my clients, or sometimes I just get stressed out because I don't feel it's this constant thing about wanting to do better and not reaching that level of excellence.
Okay, so 12 from the moon is empty. It's owned by Mercury, but so we don't have anything in the 12th from the moon, so we can't say anything about your marriage and your home life from that. So 7th from the moon is what we're obsessed with, and we don't have any planets 7th from the moon. The 7th from the moon is Scorpio. I mean, is Capricorn. So Capricorn is naturally connected to Saturn and work, and hard work and stuff like that. Is that true that you're kind of obsessed with work? Most people are. Or is that not the case?
No, I am.
Okay. Okay. So 7th house from the moon also shows how we interact with groups. So that would suggest that you would interact with more Capricorn-oriented groups. Saturn and Rahu are conjunct, so they may be more kind of rebellious, avant-garde groups, people who are more revolutionary, inventive, social action-oriented. If you do interact with groups, is that true?
Yeah, that's very true. I have friends who are very unconventional and don't live in extreme lives. It's very true, actually.
Okay, so this is showing you how you can use the moon chart, and I'm actually, everything we're saying, I'm just going through the rule book and just, okay, 6 from the moon, what the mental pains are shown from these. So 6 from your moon is Sagittarius. You have no planets in there. There's nothing aspecting Sagittarius. In fact, there's nothing aspecting Sagittarius. And it's owned by a benefic Jupiter, and Jupiter's in the 1st exalted. So my sense would be that there's not a lot of mental pain in your life. Jupiter is uplifting the moon, being conjunct the moon, uplifting your mental attitude. Jupiter, mental pain in your chart is really unafflicted. Jupiter's really unafflicted. It's exalted. It's a good planet for Leos. It's in the 12th house, but in the natal chart. But from the moon chart, it's it's wonderful, right? So is that true? We have a strong sattvic mind here? That's kind of...
Yeah, I think I don't get into, like, literally say, I don't get into tamasic states like heavy depression or anything like that. And generally I am quite forgiving and I don't hold on to grudges. So, yeah.
8th from the moon are the keys to transformation, okay? So we have K2 8th from the moon, and so the key to transforming this person's life is connected to K2. What is K2? K2 is usually meditation or Jyotish or spiritual studies. So the key to transforming your life are all three of those things. And you are using Jyotish to transform your life and your lives, clients' lives. Um, and you know, maybe it's also time to look at meditation, because it will be a very key transformational tool, because it's 8th from the moon. Something to think about. 4th from the moon deals with mother or destiny as security issues. 4th from the moon, we don't have any planets. We do have 2 planets 10th from the moon, which are kind of offsetting factors. So we have Venus and Mars in the 10th, which is career. Venus and Mars together anywhere create passion. So there's a lot of passion for career. And I could tell you would be very passionate about career. And Mars in Aries, obviously, you know, very powerful career, 10th from the moon. It seems like, I'm not quite sure how you're bringing Venus into your career. It's a benefic, so it's creating love of career. Um, um, Mars in its own sign in Aries is, you know, is very powerful. Venus and Mars are in Bharani Nakshatra, which is owned by Venus also, which is kind of a very transformational nakshatra, dealing with death. Actually, I would think death counseling would be something that would be good for you to pick up because of Bharani. I don't know if it's something you've thought about or if it's happened.
Yeah, well, I'm a psychologist, so yeah, I do some bereavement counseling. Yeah.
How is, now the question is, Venus owns the 4th house, and it's in the 10th with Mars in the moon chart. So relationship with mothers is a little tense sometimes. You get into fights with your mother?
Yeah. Yeah, my mother's very bad-tempered and quite, you know, forceful. So yeah.
Okay. And
especially when I was growing up.
okay. And then 9th and the 5th houses. 9th house shows us what we like to do at all times. So 9th from the moon is 9th from the moon is Pisces, which is very strong, owned by the exalted Jupiter. So obviously spending time with spiritual teachers, coaching is something you like to do, and that's what you become a counselor, right? And spending time with gurus maybe has not manifested in your life, but that's something that, you know, Pisces and spiritual practice, you know, should come. You know, maybe in a period connected to Jupiter at some point. You know, again, I don't know, it's something you think about, but we'd have to look at your spirituality chart. 9th house is also philosophy of life, so 12th house Pisces is, you know, very idealistic. It's very spiritually oriented anyway. So your philosophy of life is very Piscean. Is that true?
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, I'm very influenced by Jyotish and yoga. So.
Right, okay. 5th house from the moon shows what we love and adore. Again, no planets in the 5th house from the moon. The owner of the 5th house, Mercury, is in the 11th house with the sun in Taurus and a friend sign in Rohini Nakshatra. What do we do with Mercury? What do we do with, how, I mean, obviously you adore learning and knowledge, so I suppose that's true. And you enjoy spiritual knowledge. Sun is always connected to spiritual things. Mercury-Sun connection connected to Virgo. Spiritual love of spiritual learning is, you know, I guess, is that true?
Yeah, that's quite true.
Okay. So finally, the third house shows our continual worries of the mind. What and often what we imagine. It defines what we enjoy. It shows what we need to rest to enjoy. The third house again, connected to Mercury. So I guess analytic energy helps you calm the mind, right? And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I intellectualize as a defense, definitely.
and that, and that's okay, but you see how that's beneficial for your moon because it's it's connected to the third house. So, okay, so here again, here's a random example of how we did a moon chart. We didn't, we asked different questions from the moon chart. We didn't ask the standard questions. We didn't, and some of the standard things apply, but some of the things are different, right? So I'll send you the checklist, and I want you to practice your moon chart. Rotate the chart around your moon. Go through the different houses, 2 12s, 1 7, 6 8, 4 10, and we'll have to learn how to understand the pairings better. And it's very important for Vedic astrology to understand these pairings. And I have an article that I wrote about it. I'll see if I can put that together for you in a better place. So I'm going to end in a few seconds. Quick questions while I pull up the slides again. Okay, now you should be seeing, I changed the screen share to the slideshow. I don't know if you're seeing the slides, but it's
Yeah, now I can see Rashi chart.
okay. So I didn't want to go through the Rashi chart because you've all had countless hours of learning the Rashi chart. But I want to say a couple things. I think the Rashi chart is very important for health, for doing Ayurvedic perspectives on the body. We learned a little bit this in my last course about Ayurvedic astrology in lesson 7. It is the essence of the whole chart. I think 50% of the chart interpretation should be the Rashi. I would not give it more than 50%. Most people give it 90%. It really should be about 50%. And it really is, it works better for people under 36. So, if you get an older person, which you will get a lot of, you have to look at your D9 chart. We'll learn that when we do the D9 chart. You can do the D9 chart all by itself and get a really great reading. And we have to remember that the chart changes, so even though we're born with a particular rising sign, we move that the chart changes. We go into a new period, the chart changes. I'm in a Pisces period now. I'll bring up my chart again. This is something we'll see. So anyway, here's my chart again. So my chart started out in some of the Rashi dashas. I began my life in a Scorpio period, and then it rotated backwards into Libra, Virgo, Leo, Cancer, Gemini, Taurus. I got married in my Taurus period, 7th house. 8th house, 6th house, natural 6th house, difficult period for me. My Aries period. I'm in my Pisces period now. Okay, Sun's my strongest planet. Pisces is connected to my stationary Jupiter in the 8th house. Suddenly I'm teaching Jyotish. So, to talk about my chart of Scorpio rising is limiting. My chart now is really Pisces rising, and I've got Jupiter in the 4th house. Luckily able to enjoy nice home. So we have to read the chart from the chart sign. We'll learn about this in lesson 7. Okay, so I'm going to take final questions and send you on your way. I'm sorry I went over a little bit. I get enthusiastic. I tried to go a lot slower than I usually go, and I'm hoping that worked for you. Your homework is to work on your moon chart. And next week we'll do sun charts. We'll probably spend an hour on sun charts. They're pretty important, but I don't, we could spend, 8 lessons on moon charts. Actually, you can spend 8 lessons on anything, but I'm always interested in giving you overviews and allowing you to go deeper. Okay. So final questions, answers. Send me any feedback. Again, this is our first class together. If you need me to go more slowly. If you need anything, please let me know what you need. I'm here to serve. I'm not, the class doesn't work for me if it doesn't work for you. So let me know what you need. I may not be able to do it, but I always listen to suggestions. Now the only other thing is, based on, originally I had the class at 3 because I had a student who was in Australia who needed to wake up early in the morning. She's not going to be in the class. I may move the class. I'm going to move the class up to 2:30 next week, my time. So it's going to be a half hour earlier, and that will help Sonara, who's in India, start at 1 a.m. rather than at 1:30 a.m. and will help Pinar in Turkey start, a little bit earlier. So I will move the class up a half hour, and people on the West Coast, that makes it about 12:30. In Hawaii, that's about 10:30. So hopefully that will work for people. When you have people all over the globe, it's tricky to find. My colleagues who teach Jyotish around the globe, they have their classes at 7 a.m. Pacific time, which is not a good time for me ever. So, but that's how they get people in at, decent times. But, people who live on the West Coast have to take a class at 7 a.m. So, um, um, we're doing what works, and some of the people can't even be in the class because it's at 3 a.m. in the morning. But so again, homework, do your moon chart. I'll send you a copy of the cookbook, and it's not in your slideshow. Next week we'll do the sun chart, and we'll see you next week. And I'll stop the videotape. If you